Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The sound of the zipper jamming was the loudest noise in the silent, glass-walled penthouse office, echoing like a gunshot in the stillness of the night. Julian froze, his breath hitching in his throat as the cold, metallic scent of terror flooded his senses. He was trapped in the executive washroom, half-changed, with the heavy velvet dress unfastened at the back and the uncomfortable silicone bodysuit clinging to his sweat-dampened skin. Outside the mahogany door, the heavy, rhythmic footsteps of a predator approached, footsteps Julian had memorized in nightmares a decade ago. Damien Thorne wasn't just his boss. He was a ghost from a tormented past, and if he opened that door right now, Julian wouldn't just lose a job, he would lose his life. The handle turned. Julian threw his weight against the door, locking it with a trembling hand just as the mechanism clicked. Occupied. Damien's voice was a low baritone rumble, vibrating through the wood. It was the voice of a man who owned the skyline of New York, a man who didn't ask questions so much as he demanded answers from the universe. Just a moment, Mr. Thorne. Julian pitched his voice up, a practiced falsetto that hurt his vocal cords. He frantically tugged at the zipper, his knuckles white. Wardrobe malfunction. Hurry up, Julia, Damien replied, his tone clipped, devoid of warmth. The board files. I need them. Now. Julian leaned his forehead against the cool wood of the door, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. 10 years, he thought bitterly. 10 years since high school, and I am still hiding from him. The path to this humiliating masquerade had been paved with bad luck and worse debts. When Julian's father died, he left behind nothing but a mountain of gambling debts owed to the kind of men who didn't send letters. They sent breakers. The Viper, a lone shark with dead eyes and a penchant for breaking fingers, had given Julian 3 months to come up with $500,000. Julian was a brilliant analyst, top of his class, but the Viper had blacklisted him. No reputable firm would hire a man with his financial baggage. He was untouchable, except for Thorne Enterprises. Damien Thorne, the CEO, had a notorious, eccentric hiring policy. After a massive corporate espionage scandal involving his former mail secretary, a man who had sold trade secrets to a rival, Damien had purged his inner circle. He refused to hire men for any position involving close proximity to his private office. He claimed men were too ambitious, too prone to betrayal. He wanted a female executive assistant. It was madness. It was desperate. But Julian Vane was a desperate man. With his slight frame, delicate features that had been the source of endless mockery in his youth, and the help of a theatrical makeup artist friend who owed him a favor, Julian Vane became Julia. A wig of cascading chestnut hair, colored contacts to hide his striking green eyes, and a wardrobe of sharp, feminine business suits. He had walked into the interview expecting to be laughed out of the building. Instead, Damien Thorne had stared at him, at her, with an unreadable expression. A flicker of recognition had passed through those icy gray eyes, instantly suppressed. "You're hired," Damien had said, tossing Julian's falsified resume onto the desk without reading it. "Don't make me regret it." 3 months. Julian had survived 3 months in the lion's den. The work was grueling. Damien was a tyrant, a perfectionist who demanded absolute loyalty and 20-hour workdays. But Julian was good. He anticipated Damien's needs before Damien even voiced them. He knew how Damien took his coffee because he remembered it from the times Damien forced him to fetch it in the school cafeteria. He knew Damien's thinking patterns because he had spent 4 years analyzing his tormentor to avoid his wrath. "Julia," Damien called out from his desk as Julian finally emerged from the washroom, the dress zipper fixed, his wig perfectly in place. Julian smoothed the skirt of his dress, checking his posture. "Here, sir. The acquisition files for the Osaka merger." Damien didn't look up from his tablet. He was sitting in his leather chair, the city lights creating a halo around his sharp, aristocratic profile. He had grown from a cruel boy into a devastatingly handsome man, broad-shouldered and imposing, exuding an aura of raw power that sucked the air out of the room. "You took your time," Damien murmured. "I apologize." The zipper was stubborn. Damien finally looked up. His gaze swept over Julian, lingering on the high collar of the blouse that hid Julian's Adam's apple. The intensity of the stare made Julian's skin prickle. It wasn't the look of a boss. It was the look of a man trying to solve a puzzle. "Come here," Damien commanded. Julian's breath hitched. He walked across the plush carpet, the click-clack of his heels the only sound. He stopped in front of the massive oak desk. "Closer." Julian stepped around the desk. He was now standing right beside Damien's chair. He could smell him: sandalwood, expensive scotch, and the crisp scent of winter air. It was a scent that used to terrify him. Now, confusingly, it made his stomach flip in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Damien spun his chair around. He reached out, his hand hovering near Julian's waist. Julian flinched, instinctively taking a step back. Damien's eyes narrowed. "Why do you do that?" "Do what, sir?" "You flinch. Every time I move too quickly. Every time I raise my voice." Damien stood up, towering over Julian. The size difference was overwhelming. "It's like you expect me to hit you." I've had difficult bosses in the past," Julian lied, his voice trembling. "Is that right?" Damien took a step forward, invading Julian's personal space. "Or is it something else? You remind me of someone, Julia. Someone I used to know." Julian's blood ran cold. "I have a common face." "No," Damien whispered, reaching out to tuck a stray strand of synthetic hair behind Julian's ear. His fingers brushed against Julian's jawline, a touch that was shockingly gentle. "You have a face that haunts me." The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a strange, twisting tension. This wasn't just suspicion. It was attraction. A dark, confused attraction. Julian realized with a jolt that Damien Thorne, the man who hated men, the man who had tormented Julian Vane, was falling for Julia. "Sir, the meeting," Julian gasped, backing away until his hips hit the edge of the desk. Damien blinked, the spell breaking. He cleared his throat, his face hardening into its usual mask of indifference. "Right. The car is waiting below. We have the gala tonight." The gala was a nightmare wrapped in silk and champagne. It was the annual Thorne Foundation charity ball, a gathering of the city's vultures in their finest plumage. Julian was forced to wear a floor-length gown, the corset binding his chest so tight he could barely breathe. He stood by Damien's side, holding a glass of sparkling water, acting the part of the perfect assistant. Damien was charming the investors, a shark swimming through a school of fish. But his hand never strayed far from the small of Julian's back. It was possessive, territorial. "You look uncomfortable," Damien muttered, leaning down to whisper in Julian's ear. "I'm not used to crowds," Julian replied softly. "Stay close to me. I won't let them eat you." The irony was palpable, the wolf promising to protect the sheep. Then Julian saw him. Across the ballroom, standing near the velvet ropes, was a man in a tacky suit with a scar running through his eyebrow. Yusef, the Viper's right-hand man. Panic exploded in Julian's chest. Yusef was scanning the crowd. He wasn't here for charity. He was here because the Viper had grown impatient. They had tracked Julian down. "I need air," Julian choked out. Before Damien could respond, Julian turned and fled toward the terrace doors. He burst out onto the balcony, the cold night air hitting his face. He rushed to the far corner, hidden by the shadows of large potted palms. He needed to leave. Now, he needed to get out of this dress, get his savings and run. "Going somewhere, pretty thing?" Julian spun around. Yusef was there, blocking the path back to the ballroom. A nasty grin split his face. "I don't know who you are," Julian said, pitching his voice high. "Drop the act, Julian," Yusef sneered, pulling a switchblade from his pocket. The blade caught the moonlight. "We know it's you. The boss is impressed. Who knew the little accountant had the legs for a dress?" "Stay back," Julian warned, dropping the falsetto. His natural voice was low and dangerous. Or what? Yusef lunged. It happened in a blur. Julian wasn't a fighter, but he was desperate. He dodged the knife, grabbing Yusef's wrist and twisting. But the dress was restrictive. The fabric tore at the shoulder. Yusef slammed Julian against the stone railing. The wig shifted, pins digging into Julian's scalp. "I'm going to cut that pretty face off," Yusef hissed. Suddenly, a dark shape erupted from the shadows. Damien Thorne didn't shout. He didn't warn. He hit Yusef like a freight train. A fist connected with Yusef's jaw with a sickening crunch. Yusef crumbled to the floor, unconscious before he hit the ground. Damien stood over the body, his chest heaving, his eyes wild with rage. He straightened his tuxedo jacket and turned to Julian. "Julia, are you?" Damien stopped. The struggle had been catastrophic for the disguise. The wig had been knocked askew, revealing Julian's short, sweat-dampened natural hair underneath. The torn dress hung loosely, revealing the binding wrap around his chest. Silence descended on the terrace, heavier than the grave. Damien stared. He looked at the wig. He looked at the binder. He looked at Julian's face, stripped of the illusion, the familiar green eyes wide with terror. "Julian," Damien whispered. The name sounded like a prayer and a curse. Julian didn't run. He couldn't. He slumped against the railing, defeated. "Go ahead," he said bitterly, his voice his own. "Call security. Throw me out. Finish what you started in high school." Damien didn't move. His face was a mask of shock, processing the impossible reality. You are Julia? I needed the money." Julian spat, tears of humiliation stinging his eyes. "My father left debts. That man. He works for the loan shark. I had no choice. You wouldn't hire men. I did what I had to do to survive." Damien took a slow step forward. "You've been here for 3 months. Lying to me. Making a fool of me. I was doing my job. Better than anyone else you've ever hired." Julian shouted, the anger finally overriding the fear. "I know how you take your coffee. I know how to organize your schedule so you don't burn out. I know you, Damien. I've always known you. Why?" Damien roared, the sound echoing off the glass walls. "Why come to me? Of all people. Because you were the only one powerful enough to pay enough to save my life." They stared at each other, chest to chest, the air crackling with 10 years of unspoken history. Damien looked down at the unconscious thug on the floor, then back at Julian. The rage in his eyes shifted, morphing into something darker, more intense. He reached out, grabbing Julian's chin, forcing him to look up. "Did you think I bullied you because I hated you?" Damien asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Julian blinked, confusion warring with adrenaline. "You made my life hell. I made you look at me," Damien corrected. "I kept everyone else away from you. I was a child, and I was cruel, and I was terrified because of how much I wanted you." Julian's breath caught. "What? I stopped hiring men because I saw you in every single one of them, and they were never you," Damien confessed, the admission torn from his throat. "And then you walked in, dressed like this, and I felt it again. I thought I was going insane." Damien's hand moved from Julian's chin to the back of his neck, his thumb caressing the sensitive skin there. "You still owe money?" $500,000, Julian whispered. Damien scoffed. "Pocket change." He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen 3 times, and shoved it back in his pocket. "The debt is gone. The Viper won't touch you. If he tries, I will burn his entire operation to the ground." Julian stared at him, reeling. "Just like that? You're buying me." "I'm investing," Damien corrected. He stepped closer, pressing his body against Julian's. "But you lied to me, Julian. You deceived me for 90 days. Deception requires punishment," Damien murmured, his lips brushing against Julian's ear. "And since you are no longer my female assistant, human resources policies no longer apply." "I'm not wearing the dress anymore, Damien," Julian challenged, a spark of his own defiance returning. Good, Damien growled, gripping Julian's waist. I prefer you without it. Damien kissed him. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a reclaiming. It tasted of champagne and violence and 10 years of wasted time. Julian hesitated for a fraction of a second, then melted into it, grabbing Damien's lapels, pulling him closer. The fear evaporated, replaced by a searing heat that burned through the cold night air. When they finally broke apart, breathless and flushed, Damien rested his forehead against Julian's. Tomorrow, Damien said, his voice rough, you come to work, wearing a suit. My suit. And if people talk? Julian asked. Damien smirked, the arrogance returning. But this time, it was directed at the world, not at Julian. Let them talk. Let them know that the CEO of Thorn Enterprises has finally found his partner. Julian looked at the man who had been his tormentor, his boss, and now his savior. He saw the darkness in Damien's eyes, but he also saw the devotion. Yes, sir, Julian whispered. Damien's smirk deepened into a wolfish grin. We'll work on the sir later. Right now, let's get you out of this ridiculous thing. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf, by hiding in sheep's clothing until the wolf realized he was starving for something real. If you enjoyed seeing Julian take control of his fate and Damien losing his mind over it, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a high school bully who paid off your life-threatening debt? Or is the past unforgivable? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,